Hello. Sort of kind of a part two of the live thing I did a few days ago about Cups magazine because I starting to get like a lot of these magazines back, and these if you look up Cups magazine, sometimes it kind of like erotic magazines come out, but if you put in Cups magazine cafe culture, you see the stuff. There's a few of those. So what is coffee culture? Well, I mean, um, a lot of us were. Camille Stupar was the editor in 91, 92, and he came up with the name Cups at the Cafe Journal, and then we changed it to Cups, the Cafe Culture magazine. And so, that was kind of bringing everything in, like just the rise of Starbucks. San Francisco had a few cafes in the Mission and North Beach, but they had like a lot of places like the Horseshoe and Ground Zero, and a lot of these places like opened up in the '90s where there was a lot of wood paneling and the strong smell of coffee, and you'd buy like a pint for like $1. Like they would serve coffee in those big beer pint glasses and stuff. So there was cafe culture was everything was in a cafe, like music, coffee, poetry readings, like stuff like that. So I was like looking through the magazines, and I noticed a lot of the addresses and stuff. When we first started, we were in San Francisco in South Park. The address was 544 Second Street, and that's when Dave Eggers was the editor of Cups magazine. And for some reason, we had like an 18th Street address too. I don't know if that was like some kind of PO box or because it shifted. It shifted from the ownership of Cups. It shifted from Camille Stupar to Lisa Tab Eggers, and then David Latimer towards the end of '93. And then by looking at the old issues, by June '94, we had moved the offices over to Clay Street, is where David Latimer had so we're which was better for me because it was didn't have to like South Park was kind of like off the beat. You had to walk like 5 blocks from Market or whatever, and so yeah, there was a whole period like '93 and '94 was kind of like the original period and stuff, and we by that time by May '95. So what happened was after doing it a couple years, we would find there was like Chicago had a similar magazine called Strong Coffee. There was another one called Java. Paul Millman had one called Java Journal in New York. There was another Java something. I wrote for a couple. I would do like a San Francisco report for some of these. There was one in Arizona. LA had a magazine called Caffeine, which was more like a poetry magazine. And so there were several. So by '95, we thought like, okay, well, let's all become one magazine, and you become like the New York office. And so nobody was really interested. Like Caffeine wanted to do its own thing. Strong Coffee didn't want to join up, but Java Journal, which was like the most similar magazine. Paul Millman went on to do other magazines, and he had an office on Fifth back then. So in '95 we became like one magazine with Java Journal, and we were still called Cups, and they became the New York office, and so we kind of shared the advertising, and so there was most of '95 we were separate. I had never met. We never really all met until like the beginning of '96, and so like by that time, I think I was thinking like in '95 I was gonna leave San Francisco and move back to LA at the beginning of '96 maybe. But when they started talking about going to New York and stuff and taking the magazine, I kind of got interested. And then my friend Christian Edinger ended up buying the magazine. So me and Christian drove across the U-Haul together. David Latimer moved in with Paul Millman. They had a place on 14th Street. Ellen Miyati was over on First and Strauss was already there. Bob Annecy was already there. They were already kind of associated with the magazine. Christian and myself moved there. Brian Benz had moved a few months. He moved like at the end of '95. So I mean that's why he was kind of like the first person that kind of Paul Millman got annoyed because it was like at the beginning it was like Millman and Brian Benz were in the office together and they're just two different personalities. It was like oil and water, like pretty bad. So we got there in '96 and Christian, I know, had a hard time adjusting at first, I think, and stuff. So that's why there's some issues in '96 where I did a lot of, I wrote like 5 or 10 articles or something. And then Strauss had a big protest and he ended up leaving. We had no music editor for a couple months and then Meredith Oaks showed up. Okay, so, and then there was a lot of turbulence, like I mean, we showed up in New York in '96, and I remember, I think in June or July, I forgot, we took a month break or something, and pretty much everybody had left. You know, like 5 of us went there. Me, Christian, Brian Bentz, Ellen Mediotti, and Dave Latimer all moved from San Francisco to New York, relocated. David Latimer never really went to New York. He kind of ended up doing Star Trek magazine in Denver. So he was kind of San Francisco, Denver, New York, kind of sharing his time in all three and whatever. Okay, so and by that time, I think after about 6 months of all of us being there, I was the only one left. So I ended up becoming the managing editor. For that time, '96 and '97, and so that was the good time for me. But the problem was I had like Millman, Latimer, and Christian were all kind of like the bosses or something. I was the only one left, and so we had to reorganize. And so then Meredith Oaks became the music editor, and then like Susan Kirschenbaum was the fashion editor. So there was a sort of a structure. There was kind of like a second structure. Once Ellen didn't really last very long in New York, but she went to another magazine, and then I think she ended up moving back to Bay Area after a couple of years. So yeah, so we were on. So you know, we had that office for about a year on 37th Street and Fifth Avenue. In October, we ended up moving down to Orchard Street, right south, right there. What was it, 189 Orchard Street or something? Right there. There was nothing there. Back in those days, there was nothing there. Pink Pony was nearby, Katz's Deli, but there was, I mean, I think we were right next to a shop that's sold like kung fu videotapes or something. You know, there was like old Jewish like clothing things. It's not. I mean, the bars. It took about a year or so before the bars started showing up on that street. Okay, so we moved there in October '96. There's still a few issues. I don't have 70, 71. I don't have 83, 86. Some of the ones at the beginning of I don't have. Probably did the lesson during those times too. So yeah, let's see. Okay, so we were in Orchard, and then let's see, and then by issue 93, Christian had moved to 8th Street by that time and stuff. So that's where the office is by, later. And that's probably, yeah, 92. I don't know. Maybe it might have happened earlier. I don't have those issues, so I don't know what I'm talking about here. But let's see. Let me put this away. So, yeah, let me get organized. So, just talking about cups. I'll just put this in this one. This is just like a one-off. just talking about all the different locations we had. Because I mean, when I was looking at this issue, I was like looking at me, some of the bars and stuff, and it's kind of kicks in some memories and stuff. Okay, 10 minutes. Okay, gotta go.